Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. We're covering the Mishnah, the different dinim of how you can betroth a woman. And now, when we come back to Kesef, we actually had an argument in the Mishnah to Mesham Besil. What is the minimum value of that Kesef? According to Besil, it's a pruta, like all dinim require a shava pruta, the value of a pruta, the bare minimum. And according to Beis Shammai, it is a dinner. And the Gemara is going to try to explain what the argument is. Says the Gemara. We have a number of different explanations. In the middle of the page, Daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, right in the middle. The Kesef B'Shamai Emin Badina. Says the Gemara. Ma'itamayde B'Shamai. What? We understand here because all kinyonim, everything is mitzvah b'shava pruta. What is the logic of B'Shamai? Then comes to Kiddushin Daf. Amar Zayda. She came Isha Makpedes al Atzma. The reason is because a woman is very particular about her dignity. The aim is Kadeshes b'pacha b'dina. She doesn't want to get herself involved in a marriage if she receives less than a dinner. So before we go further, what does Beis Hillel hold? So it seemed Nachrani explained the argument, or the crux of the argument in Beis Hillel is, how do we view this kesef? Is this kesef kinyan over here by a woman Kiddushin? Is that value, or is that merely a method of transaction? Beis Hillel says merely a method of transaction, and therefore a pruta is sufficient, because that's all transactions. The minimum requirement is a pruta. But Beis Shammai says it's not a transaction; it's also a valuation, and therefore less than a dinner is insulting. Comes along and says if it has to do with dignity. So what about so Omar that's what Rav Zayda said. Omar said let me after according to this, going back say that Rabbi Yanai, the daughters of Rabbi Yanai, the captain of Navshayu, they were a wealthy family and they were makbi. Taisa did wants to say, can't be talking about Rabbi Yanai. Where do we know that he was rich and why were his daughters so special? And the Gemara saying in a way that everybody knew. So he actually says, take away the Rab, it's Yanai Hamelech. It's Yanai Hamelech, and we know that people bought their kingdom. Marta Basbaisis bought it for a number of dimmer tarkiva de dinner. What do you call it? Two carbon of dinner, 3 carbon of dinner. So therefore, that's the only one we know who expects that kind of payment, and therefore it's his daughters. They will not become interested in getting engaged in less than a tarkiva of dinner. So therefore, which is 3 kavin. Is hachinami? Are you going to tell me the pashta yod v'kibla chadzuzamach if let's say by whatever reason she decided to accept less? Hachinami d'lavi kedushin, because since generally speaking they always take that amount, even if she took it once, so it should be like butler daita, she will have to follow the rest of the family. And for them, less than that is not considered money. Malay, so Rav Zayda says, 1 second. If the woman is prepared to accept less, I'm not talking about such a situation. Of course, it's her prerogative. If it's her dignity, it's her prerogative. Kikamina, what am I talking about? The Kocha Balayla. If she got engaged at night, and if she got engaged at night, she doesn't know, and therefore, if you gave her less than a dinner, it's not considered a kedushin. Or inami de shavish a point of slip. I forgot to tell him how much it take. Since we know that it has to be a minimum of a dinner for that dignity, that's what it should be. Now, and that's the halacha for everybody. If you remember a few days ago, we discussed whether you can get married at night, because gittin is not at night, and shtar we learn from gittin, and so those say that you cannot get married at shtar. And then the question is whether you compare a couple of the shaynim that want to say that you cannot get engaged at night. And then the question is, what do they do with this Gemara right here, which says clearly the kotche balayla, they're engaged at night. Rabbi Yisrael says. So the others will say there's a distinction between money and shtar's clear. This is from money, and money it could be done at night. It's only shtar. If you get married somebody at night, you cannot get married. He says, further, Rabbi Yisrael says, I'll give you another reason to explain, another basis to understand the Beshamai. Tamai Beshamai, called Kesef or Matera. Wherever the Torah talks about Kesef, the word Kesef means Natsul, but money. And which money? Kesef Tsuri. From Tsuri, the money there has a greater value than normal. So if the Torah says shekel, it means a shekel from Tsuri. If the Torah says some other denomination, is that denomination from Tsuri. No, the Torah given any denomination, and it's the smallest coin of Tsuri. And according to this explanation, it could be a ma. According to the second explanation of Rashi later on, the Gemara from his Rebbe's and other Rishonim, the smallest denomination of Tsuri is a dinar. And whenever the Chacham say you have to pay something, it's Kesef Medina. It's an eighth of that value. It's the general currency out there that's commonplace. Good, let's analyze it, and therefore that's the Shami holds that like Rav Yehuda whenever it says Kesef, and even though here it doesn't say the word Kesef by Kiddushin, but we're learning Lekicha. You learn that from Avraham Avinu when he purchased, and it was Kesef involved over there. So therefore it has to be Kesef Tzuri, and that's why he says it has to be a dinner. Says the Gemara, let's analyze it. What did he say that 8 times the kesef? It means from Tzoy, but shall have been the bring. We take the small denomination, the commonplace currency. Says the Gemara, it's a rule. That's a question. We have a concept called Meidim Mixes. I stake a claim. You, the respondent, you make a partial admission. That's called a Meidim Mixes, and then you have to. Since you're agreeing or giving credibility to my taina, you then have to swear that the balance you don't own. So we learn that the Gemara says that it has to be. It could be learned the word Achayema Ki. Who's there? So we dash, even though it's written there by Shluchim, we have a thing called in Baruch the Kuf's aid of Parshas Kosov Khan. It's a mixture of Parshas, even though it's talking about the Shem, it's talking about everywhere, and that is who is distant as here. Zeh I'm moided to, and who I disagree with. Who's that? So what happens is, what do you call it? With Tlam, we learned in Tiny. I gave you to guard for me kesef money. It's in singular form, a kalim or kalim, and then it turns out to be have a dispute. There's a made of mixes, and the din is it says there that you need a minimum of 2 ma'is money, which is less than dinner, but 2 mice. As an argument, Rabbi Shmuel, what do you mean 2? Who has to say 2 mice? Rav says that the denial has to be a serious amount of 2 mice. And Shmuel says, no, the claim has to be 2 mice. And you have to, you could admit even to a pruta. Now the question follows. The Mishnah is, if kesef in the Torah means a serious denomination, if kesef means a certain coin, not just from, it doesn't mean money in general, but it means a certain coin, the Torah, which what? You said it from soil, and if there's no, it doesn't say shekel, that means the smallest coin, small coin, let's say it's ma, then how do you change it from 1 ma to 2 ma? The Torah says kesef single, and you make it 2. Unless kesef doesn't mean a certain coin, kesef just means money generally. And Chacham therefore have the right to decide which money it is. That's like Rabasi. That's one way of learning Pshat Gemara. The other way of learning Pshat Gemara is that the pasuk says kesef, which means a dinner. How do you reduce it down to mas? But now the Mishnah, the Mishnah has to be a prut. Gemara says, you know why? Hasam Dumini Kalim. They have a special shava that is similar to Kalim. Ma Kalim Shnaim, just like Kalim is 2. Af Kesef Shnaim. Just like Kalim is plural, therefore it says Kesef and Kalim. That's how we know it's plural. Generally, Kesef it means a certain coin from Tzur, but because we compare to Kalim, it's 2. Uma Kesef, and while we're already learning this, Hekesh, Uma Kesef, Dava Choshev has to be significant. Af Kalim Choshev can also be something significant. Of course, the other way we learned that the question was that the lowest coin in Tzur was a dinner. How do we reduce it to ma? Then the Gemara's guess is a little bit different. We're comparing it to kalim. Just like kalim is enough to be chashuv, so too by money has to be chashuv. And ma is chashuv. 2 ma is chashuv. Says the Gemara. Okay, another question about maisa. Let's see, by maisa sheni, you have to take the first fruits of 10% and bring it to the shrine. But if it's too heavy or too large, you can commute it to money. And then when you have, as we'll see, you have copper coins, you can then change it if you have enough. Turn it into sloim. But how do you get copper coins in the first place? If it says that says kesef, and you're saying that kesef, according to Bira Rasi, that kesef means it has to be from Tzoir. With number that paid seller, if you take prutas, you can turn it into seller. Kesef, so that's clearly that the machleki there what Bashar said what you do, but nevertheless, it says clearly that you can start out with prutas. It says Torah kesef. So there's an exception again. Why? It says a number of times kesef and hakesef riba. Because it says a number of times kesef, we say that comes to include even prutas. Next one. You give money. The kamlei becomes yours. Yet Rabbi Shmuel hegdish shava mana shechilei al shava pruta mechul. Says clearly that hegdish, the value of a mana, if you exchange it onto the value of pruta, it is a good exchange. Now, how can you use a prutim? The Torah clearly says v'nosan kesef v'kamlei. Says the Gemara Hasanami kesef. It says a number of times kesef to tell you that you can use other things as well. Or now more than that, or because make a Gzeda Shava, the Kesev of Hegdish from Kesev that we just learned before regarding Maisa. And because by Maisa we said you can use Prutas, here also you can use Prutas. Is the Yalef from Maisa, learn from Maisa. We learn that from Maisa. Says the Gemara, here we have a problem. Comes to Kiddushin of a woman, the Chsiv Ki Yikach Isha, Bola, the Goma, we learn Kicha of the effort. But not in the fashion Mishnah, Hill says, but Pruta, V'shov Pruta. It says in Mishnah, Hill says a Pruta and a Shov Pruta. If you're saying Kesef means the argument is based on the fact that Kesef, whether it means from Tzor, like Rabbi Rashi says, or just money, and that's what Beis Hill holds. So name of Rabbas Domik Beishamai, Asol Beishamai. If that's the point of Beishamai. So you can't be that's explanation of Beishamai. Now, Rabbi Rashi has no problem because they'll say that by Kiddushin, nowhere does it say kesef. It's the Gzeda Shava is that you can, kicha is the effort. Or we also had other lemudim as well besides kicha. So therefore, we can say that it has nothing to do with the din of Yerubasi. But you're using that as an explanation of Beishamai. Yeah, how can that be that so you're saying Yerubasi Pascal Beishamai versus Beis Hill? That cannot be. This is how we learn it. According to this version, we're trying to explain Bishame based on Rabbi Rasi. This is what Rabbi Rasi says. Or we can say that they're talking about whenever the Torah gives a fixed amount, not just the word kesef, but the Torah says you have to pay a knas of $30 if, let's say, regarding killing an Eved, or the Torah says if you rape a woman, you have to pay so much, or Moitzi Shemer, you have to pay so much. Whenever the Torah gives a fixed amount, that has to be you have to use in the currency of Tzor, which is a very expensive currency. Ha'amar b'toide kesef tzodi b'shal devreim, and whenever the Rabbanan give a fixed amount, then a kesef medina. That's the whole chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Asi Tanina. It's a Mefesh Mishnah. Chomesh Shleim Shaben, the 5 Shleim that we learned before the Ches, that you have to pay the Pinat Ben, or Shloishim Shal Eved, the 30 Shleim you pay for an Eved, and Chamishim Shal Oinus, or 50 Shleim you pay for raping over Shal Mefata, or seducing, or Meir Shal Meitzi Shemra. All of them, kulam b'shekel hakodesh b'monotzayis. It says in the Mishnah clearly you have to pay monotzayis. So what's Avidim Rasi adding? Says, what are you right? V'shal devreim kesem din. The chiddush is when it comes to amounts of the rabbanon, you only pay the local currency. The Leitran, that doesn't say. Would you have an example where the rabbanon gave a fixed amount for a knas? The Tanya we learned hatakei lechavede. If somebody blows right next to somebody's ear and in his ear or frightens him, or he bangs on the wall right next to him and frightens him, or makes him deaf, you have to pay him a penalty. Noitzin loy seller. We'll have this babakama. Noitzin loy seller. You have to pay him a seller. What kind of seller? A seller of the common value. Like him, my seller, but don't think seller means for zuzi, which is a standard seller. Sorry, my seller, an eighth of that. Palga de zuzi, a half of one zuz. The avida inish the cut of the palga zuz is people call a half of zuz istri, which is a seller. That's another explanation. That's explanation number 2. Rabbi Zayda, and then this one here, Rabbi Yosef. Comes along the third one, Ishlaki, Tamai, Bishama. You know what Bishama's word is? Kiddushin, like Chizki later on. That he says over there that an Eved can buy themselves back by calculating how many, what the master paid for him and how many years he already served out of the 6 years. Let's say he served for the year, so then you devalue by half. And that's what he has to pay him back. And in fact, that's one of the ways we learn that Kesef is a formula of being acquired in the first place. So it says Chizki Makrav, it says Vehiv de. By saying Vehiv de, sounds like they both are involved in his redemption. The master as well. How's the master involved? Because he negotiates, he has to reduce according to the year that the Eved already worked. That you have to reduce from the pidyon by an Ommavira by an Eved. This Ommavira goes up. If you say that the minimum amount, when it says the Torah Kesef is that you have to pay a dinner. What does it have to do with Kiddushin Sunsi? So then it makes sense. There's money, there's change left over, so you can calculate per annum how much it's worth. I put it down to a pruta. If you're going to tell me that all the master has to give is a pruta, then there's nothing less than a pruta. So what do you mean you negotiate? For 3 years you got half a pruta, that's what's coin. The pruta mimagada is nothing less. Saying, well, that's no raya. So we're not even talking about this year. We're just trying to understand first regarding an Eved. So why do you have to jump straight away to a dinner which is so precious? Maybe if there's room to maneuver, if there's room to negotiate, room to redeem, then you redeem. For example, you paid a dinner for the value, but the other put let it go. But if you only gave a pruta, there's no way you ever could redeem. before we even get further, why can't we explain the pasuk that way? That it can be that way because dum yud has to be similar to you because the Torah says there that the master has to be able to marry if he wants to this Amavri. In fact, it's a mitzvah, he or his son. Ma yid, just like a yid. We cannot coerce the master or his son to marry her yet, but the possibility has to be there. But let's say it's his daughter, someone that he cannot, or his sister that he's buying, that he cannot in any way marry. He cannot buy her as a slave either. Same thing over here. If there's not a possibility of being redeemed at all of the hevda, if it's not such a possibility, then we'll have his that he can't buy in the first place. So getting back to the shlokish's proof, so it has to be a dinner, something that you can calculate. So and since kedusha isha according to Beishama, he compares the amavriya because the amavriya can be married by the master, so there's kedusha involved as well. Just like if it's a dinner over here, also it's a dinner. So you went, okay, but why do we jump from a pruta to a full dinner? Why don't you jump from a pruta to half a dinner? And there's change involved. Then we can, work out, calculate the redemption for the Evid. Or maybe stay prutas. So the Gemara, kiven da afiktim bepruta. We have standard coins. The moment you take an obligation out from the level of the realm of a pruta, the next realm is adina, ukma adina. You don't say two of this, two of that. There has to be a single coin, and the next step up is adina. You go from coins to dollars. Rava gives a fourth explanation. Hain the time of Nisham, you know what Shammai what is? Like we don't want the Yiddish girls being cheap, and therefore Shammai says you have to give a dinner something of value. Otherwise, the people don't have respect for them properly, and so therefore, in other words, it's only midrabanan that we're saying. And till now we were learning it's Mahatayda, what does Kesef mean and so on. Here we're saying it's midrabanan, and Rashi adds because afkeina rabbanan lekedushin. Everyone agrees with Prutya, but Vishamai says that it's not appropriate for a woman because it makes the whole process makes it look cheap. So the Rabbanan stepped in, intervened, and they said, if you go less than a dinner, we are going to remove the Kiddushin Minay. So we have another example that Rabbanan used that rule of Kini Kiddushin Minay. This is for the benefit of women.